Oh, hello. Okay, well, today we have a very special guest on the podcast. Matthew Skinner, CEO of Wide Open Agriculture. Matthew is passionate about driving innovation at the intersection of plant-based protein and sustainable agriculture. We were told about Matthew and his organization through Ulrich Postian with Invest MV in Germany a few weeks back, and we were so excited to dig in and to learn all about your business, Matthew, yourself as an entrepreneur, and honestly, anything you'd like to share with us as it relates to business, plant-based proteins. So we're so excited to learn more about you, and perhaps we'll just kick it right off. Take us on a journey. For our listeners who aren't aware, what would you like them to know about Wide Open Agriculture?
So Wide Open Agriculture was formed to do things differently in the food system. It was designed to support the idea of regenerative agriculture, which is about getting better outcomes for people and environment. And we've had various iterations of what that business model looks like. But there was one particular legume/pulse that we were always very interested in, and that's the lupin. And the reason we're so excited about lupins is they are 85% of the world's lupins are grown in WA. They are very nutritious. So they're 40% protein, 40% fiber, about 8% oil, and then some carbs, sugars, other things. And they grow in very sandy, dry soils, which is why they're so prevalent in Western Australia. The challenge has always been that they taste very bitter, and so they're not particularly useful as a human food. But farmers love them. They love them because they put nitrogen in the soil, and they also boost protein content of subsequent wheat crops. So Wide Open Agriculture came into this ecosystem of lupins where farmers are saying, I plant lupins, they're amazing, they regenerate my soil, they're fantastic. But the problem is there's no valuable end market for them. They're just going into animal feed. And so what we've seen over time is people are planting less and less lupins and replacing them with canola, which has, detrimental effects to the soil, but also needs a lot more fertilizer. So WA has been working on the problem of how do you value add lupins as a human food ingredient for about 30 years. And in 2020, WOA licensed the technology that was developed at a WA university called Curtin University to take a global license on the technology that unlocks the potential of lupins as a human food ingredient. And for the past 5 years, that has been it's pretty much our primary mission now. It started off as a bit of a science experiment, this technology that created 5 grams of lupin protein isolate in a lab in Curtin University became 5 kilos with a government science laboratory called the CSIRO, became 20 kilos a week at our pilot plant, and now has become sort of 100 tons a year in our commercial facility. It's a pre-commercial. It's not at scale, but it's a pre-commercial facility in Germany. And so we are bringing lupin protein to the world. And that is really what Wide Open is all about right now.
Fascinating. From 5 grams to 100 tons. Those are some impressive numbers. When you talk about the valorization of the lupin, is it a protein isolate? Is it a concentrate? Is it oil as well? What are some of these value-added products you're looking at?
So obviously we started off with the protein because that was the technology that was developed, and it was really about unlocking the value of that protein, which is very high in all your essential and non-essential amino acids. It's very beneficial. It's easily absorbed. It's got a PDCAAS score of 0.96. So very well digested. And that was where we started. Obviously, we don't want to leave 60% of the lupin seed on the table having no value. Mm-hmm. And so now that we are at the point of selling lupin protein globally, we're now starting to look at the lupin fiber, which is an insoluble fiber that is also quite soluble. So it's got some interesting properties. And the lupin oil, which is a really interesting ingredient for the cosmetic sector.
Oh,
So we are suddenly looking at this, and superfood is overused in the industry, but we've got this lupin seed that sinks nitrogen to the soil. It boosts protein content, has all these amazing amino acids, and has protein, fiber, and oil. And people don't know about it. People just don't know what it is, how good it is. And so that is kind of our mission, is to educate people on the value and the benefit of lupin.
that is really exciting, and I think it's exciting to learn about these plants, these seeds. We talk about pulses a lot. I feel like we talk about pulses a
Hmm.
lot in this podcast because it's exploring ingredients, exploring the businesses behind it, but then also thinking about all the different categories that these ingredients can go into. So, Matthew, from your perspective, like when it comes to diving into different categories and who you're engaging with, what are those categories that are ripe for opportunity to really dig into lupin protein, oil, fibers? There's a lot. There's a lot of benefits to these plants, which is really cool.
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is everything.
Mm.
And one thing that we have really found is the protein is so versatile, it is functional in pretty much any food category that we can think of. And because people don't know about lupins, we've done a lot of work on different applications. The big ones that we think has huge potential, obviously the health shake market, so protein shakes, protein bars, protein balls. The beauty there is it's quite a quick route to market because it's essentially a powder already.
Mm.
Um, Plant-based dairy, so it makes excellent cheese, yogurt, milk, dips and sauces, creme fraiche, hummus,
Mm.
baked goods, protein fortified bread, protein and fiber fortified bread, biscuits, cookies. I mean, the list. We were working with someone on a high protein pizza base, um, noodles, lupin tofu, so
Ooh,
lufu,
Cool.
which
Yeah.
was
fufu. Okay,
you
Is that
know
trademark?
the name's a work in progress. The name's a work
okay,
in
okay.
progress. But the short answer is it's limited only by our time and imagination. The oil, we probably could use it as a cooking oil, but the value of it is so interesting with its unique blend of omega 3s and 9s and 3s and 6s, sorry, that it makes more sense in the cosmetics category, which is also much more valuable. And then the fiber, again, fiber enhanced baked goods would be it's one. Things like Metamucil fiber drinks, you could easily have
Hmm.
them made from lupin fiber as well if people don't like the harshness of some of those products. So we are a small company, and that is our limit is our time, energy, and money, obviously. But it's hugely versatile, which is why we think it's so exciting. Is it's got such potential as a food ingredient globally.
No, that's
I'm
really
already thinking
exciting.
supplements because of the omega. Sorry, Christine.
No, go ahead. I was gonna ask you about the ratio, actually. I
Yeah.
know our minds went to fat, and we're like, "Oh, what are the benefits, from the
I just
ratio?"
came from a supplements trade show in
Yeah, you
Vegas.
came
So
back from
from
supply
Supply Side
side.
Global last week. And it's all about health and omegas, and you see all the salmon, the all the other kind of fish, but you don't see a lot of plant-based omegas. So I'm curious what that ratio is like from Lupin.
Yeah, look, it's good. I mean, this is one of the things I always find surprising about developments in the food industry more
Mm.
generally is there are amazing products and substances out there that have incredible health, nutrition properties, but we just haven't looked that hard.
Mm-hmm.
And we just haven't explored it all. And so there is still huge, runway for discovering new products and launching new products to market that contain, really nutritious and beneficial substances. We think lupin is one of them, but I'm sure, lots of others as well.
But a great story, right? It's regenerative. I think was is so fascinating as a protein, and you use it in many applications, not just for food, but in the field as well. I'm so curious on on the bread and bakery application. But I'm going to let Christine ask their questions.
You mentioned, bitterness, and obviously that
Mhm.
sometimes of course, being a challenge from a sensory perspective because you want to be able to delight consumers and really bring this value so that it's not just functional, but then it's also like, okay, this is a delightful process to enjoy this product. Is that bitterness reduced or eliminated through your processing measures, and what does that look like high level? Are there different levels of processing that would then give you a cleaner profile? Curious on that front.
Yeah, so the bitterness is generated from the alkaloids that are contained in the lupin seed. WA's sweet lupins have less alkaloids than some of the other lupin varieties out there, such as European and there's some South American ones as well. And they're the ones we use typically, and also because we're a WA company. The extraction process, so we run a wet extraction process. So, you grind up the lupins, you mix, put acid in them and you drop out the protein. That process eliminates those alkaloids because we wash them out. We then have two essentially products. One is we wash them out and we isolate the protein down to about 90%. And then there's another kind of product where we add our Curtin University IP to it, and that creates a slightly better functionality for certain food categories. And that functionality improves the solubility and improves the gelation. But all of them have a very neutral taste, a very clean profile, and a very light neutral color. So kind of none of the sort of green beany taste you get with some other plant proteins. It's a very neutral, flavorless product, which always sounds, I'm always embarrassed when I go, it's a flavorless product. But that's the ultimate thing you want as an ingredient provider, particularly protein, is you want it to taste like nothing so people aren't worried about having to hide the taste. So
Hmm.
I'm proud to say it tastes of nothing.
A taste of
That
nothing.
no, but
The
as
notes of
product
nothing.
developer, yeah. Product developers know that because we don't want that chalky, beany, taste associated with the peas, the fava, the soy, and all that things that's typically loaded in a granola bar or a
Yeah,
health
and
bar.
that's one of the challenges of bringing a new product to market is its newness and its functionality differences.
Mhm.
So we've talked to multiple companies over the last 5 years where we say, here's our lupin protein isolate.
Mhm.
Let us help you work with it. And they say, no, we don't need your help. We're experts. And they take it into their factory and then they call us and say, or their R&D department, they say it doesn't work. And we had one example where it was going to be made into a vegan egg mixture. And they were using fava protein and they said, we'll try your lupin protein. And they came back and said, it's terrible. It's like custard. It's lumpy. It's too thick. And we said, well, how were you using it? And they said, we took out the fava and we put lupin. And we looked at their recipe and there were gums and emulsifiers. And we said, well, lupin doesn't need those ingredients. So you can actually take out some of those ingredients, save yourself money, improve the functionality, and you'll get a better product from an amino acid and protein profile. And suddenly it opens up a whole new conversation. But the secrecy and kind of established processes in the food industry, particularly when people are using soy and pea so extensively, does make it difficult to bring a new product through that system.
Really interesting. And piqued interests are piqued, of course,
Yeah.
as we're thinking of a different blend.
So
Because
many
you
questions.
mentioned taking out a lot of those additional, ingredients that we would need as looking at tools in our toolkit, especially when developing new products. So definitely helpful to dig in. I'm sure our listeners are probably going to have way more questions. We will dive in a little bit later on how to best connect with yourself and your team as well. But Matthew, you brought up earlier that this began as a science experiment. So have you always worked in food? Have you always worked in this space? What has been your journey?
I've never worked in food before in my life.
This is a good story. I
This is gonna be a
love
great story. Let's hear it.
So I trained as an accountant with KPMG in Sydney. I moved to the UK where I worked with KPMG in London, and then I worked for a testing and inspection company, quality assurance, called Intertech. I worked in their finance department for 5 years in the UK. And then I moved to Dubai for 5 years, running first of all, the CFO for the Gulf and Africa, and then latterly the managing director for the Middle East, North Africa, and Pakistan. Primarily oil and gas, with a little bit of clothing and textile testing. And it's a really interesting business. So the way I described it for people is when you put a liter of gasoline in your car, how do you know it's a liter? So someone has to measure the pump to make sure it's a liter. And how do you know that you're putting 95 or 98 or whatever the grades are in Canada? How do you know that's what's going in your car? So Intertech did that on a massive cargo ship basis across all the ports in the Gulf. So really amazing experience, fantastic living in Dubai. I'm married, I've got 3 kids. And then COVID happened and I spent a year running the Middle East from my bedroom.
Wow.
And
Wow.
after a year, I was like, I talked to Em, my wife, and said, this isn't as much fun as it was. Part of the enjoyment was going to travel and meeting customers and the employees. This just isn't fun anymore. And we wanted to come back to Australia. And so we flew into Sydney. We had to do 2 weeks in a hotel in quarantine. And this was April 21. And we said to the kids, your school year starts in January 22. So we've got 8 months. We're going to buy a motorhome, an RV, and we're going to travel around Australia for 8 months.
Ooh.
All in.
Amazing.
And everyone was like, let's go. And that's what we did. And it was during that process, as we went around Australia and looked at how food was grown, sold, distributed, going through, the cane farms in Queensland and the beef cattle stations in the outback, I started thinking about where is our food coming from? How do these food systems work? And what does it mean to be, how do we make better choices about what we eat and how we consume? We were meant to go back to Sydney, but because of COVID lockdowns, we were worried about getting trapped in Victoria and New South Wales. So we came west to the West Coast, the best coast, obviously.
Yes.
And we landed in Perth, and I was then looking for a company that was doing something a little bit different, and wide open agriculture piqued my interest. It was doing regenerative agriculture, and I quickly kind of understood what that meant. Had these really interesting projects at the time. It was doing the Lupin project. It was also doing an oat milk that was recently launched, and it had a regenerative food brand called Dirty Clean Food. Now, in my naivety, and probably the naivety of people in the company as well, that's too much to try and do. It's hard work running a food brand. It's hard work getting a consumer milk on shelf. And it's very hard doing a consumer experiment for a new ingredient that no one's heard of. And it takes time and it's expensive and you need to kind of go slow. So I joined the company in May 22. We sold the oat milk and the Dirty Clean Food business in April 24. It was costing too much money and it was distracting from the core mission. And since that, we've been focused purely on Lupin protein. And so that's how my journey ended up talking about Lupin protein to podcasters in Canada.
In Germany, right? Through a German connection.
Yes. Yeah, we're an Australian company with manufacturing in Germany, selling to South America, Europe, China, and Australia. Like we're a global company. Like Lupin it's a real thing now and it's growing, and the more we can talk about it and the more publicity we can get for it, the more people whose interest is piqued and are going, oh, what is this new ingredient? Is it something I should be looking at? And in most cases, the answer is yes.
Any exciting initiatives coming to Canada or looking at Canada as a potential market?
I met Tristan Choi from the Lupin platform,
Yes.
they're very interested in. So Lupins, we're like, we're all looking at something that no one else is looking at. So we're a very special club. And so anybody who's looking at Lupins is automatically a friend and is automatically kind of, how do we help each other? And so in Canada, they're looking at Lupins for the same reason Australia is because as a rotation crop in broadacre farming, It's got amazing properties. The challenge is, how do you get value out of that lupin crop so that it becomes valuable as a human ingredient? So we're talking to people in Canada about how do we work together to develop that. And they've been working on a soft serve ice cream made from lupin protein that I think they were selling in Winnipeg. Probably, I think probably the season is over for ice cream right now.
I never say no to ice cream. I don't know.
is there a season for ice cream?
Yeah,
But maybe in
no.
Winnipeg there is.
Gets cold there.
Yeah, it
Yes.
does.
But
Definitely
yeah,
gets
so
cold there.
Canada's looking at lupins as well. And everybody is looking at lupins. Europe is looking at lupins because they want to reduce reliance on imported pea and soy.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking to a Greek company or Greek foundation, and they were worried about the deterioration in their soils and desertification of the environment. And they were looking at what crop they should be planting to help reverse that effect. And they got in contact because they said, we're looking at lupins, but we don't really understand what the end market use is for this product. Can you help us? And so the people are starting to wake up to the environmental benefits, but our job is to pave the way for that human food experience that really allows for broad scale change and adoption for lupin protein.
It's really interesting to hear about the connection to global friends who are curious about exploring ingredients that provide function, but then also environmental benefits and sustainability benefits as well. You mentioned a few different pathways, but I'm really curious, how do you work with industry? If, people are curious to get involved, they're curious about these ingredients, perhaps how to grow them. Like, how do you and your organization engage with the food industry?
So I think there's probably a couple of different ways. So people who are interested in growing them, we have good network of people who are lupin farmers and agronomists, and WA has a lot of deep technical knowledge on lupin farming and lupin science, and so we can always connect people into that network. And obviously, we have in-house expertise on that. From a food manufacturer, and then this was the other kind of this was the other surprise when I joined the food industry. I had this sense that everybody had their own manufacturing facility, and it was kind of bespoke, and it was niche, and it was, it produced your product and nobody else's. And I quickly realized, particularly in, say, oat milk, you would have contract manufacturers that would just churn out tens of thousands of liters a day, and half of them went to this brand, and the third went to this brand, and the rest went to another brand. And I was like, well, that's just depressing. The idea that everything just comes off the same production line. But when we're sometimes we're working with those food manufacturers who are developing a product for, let's say, a supermarket, and, they're going to be the contract manufacturer to supply that product. Then obviously there's a lot of work to refine formulas and make sure it works. And then obviously we work with food brands themselves who are looking to launch a new novel product that they think has merit in the market. And then we do a lot of support with them in R&D to make sure not only does their product works, but it's also that they have the support of our knowledge about the health benefits, the environmental benefits, the amino acid benefits. So we're supporting them with marketing information to bolster their product claims as well.
That's really helpful, thinking about the marketing side, what can be said on pack in all the different countries, because I think often that comes about where it's like, how can we share this information in a really clear, concise, and legit way that consumers will understand and pick up, especially if it's a newer exploration and perhaps a new category as well. That's so helpful and really cool to hear that you're supporting the industry on that side.
And so one of the interesting things about the food industry, people who are looking at lupin protein or protein generally, I categorize them in two categories. One is your conscious lupin consumer. So this is someone who wants a new form of protein. They don't want pea, they don't want soy. They're looking at what's new, what's nutritious, what's got a good amino acid profile. They will look at lupin specifically and say, I'm going to evaluate that as my protein source. How does it compare to the others? And generally, when that happens, they're like, actually, I really like lupin, I'm going to work with it. There are other companies who are saying, I want a protein addition to my product. Consumers don't care. Like if you pick up a muesli bar that says 10 grams of protein, how many people look on the back and go, well, what is the source of protein? And for those consumers, the unconscious consumers, Lupin is not there yet. It's too small. It's too expensive. And consumers don't really care that they are what protein they're consuming. Eventually, though, and this is my big dream. When the likes of Nestle, Unilever, Kellogg's, insert name of big company here, when they've recycled, when they've got water recycling in all their facilities, and when they've got solar panels on all their roofs and all their packaging is biodegradable, they're going to look and say, how do I reduce the carbon footprint of my products? At some point, someone's going to say, I have to replace soy, pea with Lupin because it is a better, or, meat with Lupin. And once you do that, then you start making significant change in the carbon emissions in your food production. That's my dream.
Wow,
That's your
I
dream.
love it.
Love
It's a
hearing the
good
dream. Yeah.
To realize your dream, is there anyone that you'd like to shout out to? Because we're reaching this point of the podcast that we love to ask this of our guests. Anyone that you'd like to shout out to or recognize who helped you along the way?
So I think we started off as the company started in 2015. It listed in 2018. But the early founders, Anthony Maslin and Ben Cole, they were the ones who identified the need for, progress in regenerative agriculture, particularly in WA. They had a lot of support from some of our early backers in Fanya Pon, part of the Pon Foundation family. It's a big European industrial family. They provided a lot of support, particularly in the early years, and then through later capital raisings as well. And the Common Land Foundation, whose kind of principal aim is to support landscape regeneration on a multi-decade timeline. And so these are the organizations and groups that identified what WOA was doing, saw that it needed to be done, and made sure that there was a pathway to keep the company going while it investigated all these opportunities. Now we have momentum, we have sales, we have much more interest in Lupin. It's now about execution of these plans, but we wouldn't be here without the support of the Ponds, the Common Land Foundations, and obviously the founders.
That's so great to hear because the pathway to industrial ingredient application, and if it's especially something novel, is a long, long pipeline. So it's so nice to hear that you've niched down, you've narrowed down that approach and that strategy. It is a long road, especially something that's so different, right? You talked about, working with industry, trying to put your protein into their processing and then coming up with all kinds of questions. So you must have a good technical team helping you through some of these application questions,
Well,
working through that.
we are world experts in Lupin protein.
Yeah.
Not necessarily how to grow it, but how to process it, how to use it, and how it supports human health, human nutrition. Like, because so few people are doing it, we are world experts.
That's great to hear.
Oh my
Fantastic. So
goodness.
if my
Yeah.
protein bar is not working and I can get rid of my hydrocolloids in my smoothie, I'm all for this.
Oh my gosh. So we don't forget,
Yeah.
I'm sure our listeners are going to ask, where can they find you and your team and dig in and get more information? I'm sure people would love to explore some samples. What's the best way to find you?
So we're on LinkedIn, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on TikTok now. I'm not on TikTok, but we are on TikTok. But the website's probably the best place, www.wideopenagriculture.com.au. On there is a lot of information about lupins. There's all the technical brochures, but also the applications. So all the recipes that we've developed that use lupin protein. There's also contact forms on the website. So if you get in contact and you'd like a sample, we'll send samples out to you so that you can explore the benefits of lupin protein. And obviously, I will get a sample in the post to both of you. So yes, your smoothies can be delicious and nutritious.
I love it.
Okay, so we're going to get into the next section.
Yes.
This is now a tradition on the podcast. And this is where we pass questions from previous guests on to the next, not knowing who they are. So this question is coming in from Melissa from Vegan. She's one of the co-founders. And they do wonderful plant-based beverages and mixes. And the question that she has for the next guest is, what is the scrappiest thing you've done as an entrepreneur in your business?
So the one that comes to mind, we went to, in WA, there's big agricultural field days. So it's, big machinery, latest cropping information. But there's also food tents where there's, beef, pork, etc. And there's wine and alcohol and everything. And we booked a food tent, and we were not quite sure what the reception would be, but we developed a series of products. And the one that we rushed to get over the line was a vegan cheese made from lupins. And it's actually a very good cheese. It slices like cheddar, it melts, it grates. And attending this agricultural field day is a lot of lupin farmers. And we were talking about how do we name this product. And I said, right, we're going to call it lupin cheese. And so we rushed to get it ready, and we got it out, and we had it on display. And all day I was feeding lupin farmers lupin cheese, and they were amazed. They were like, this stuff is incredible. How good. I had no idea that lupins could be used in this way. I can't believe this is a vegan cheese. Like, it's unbelievable. And it was a really interesting way to kind of just start changing people's expectations of what it is that we're trying to do. We could talk about it, we can show them products, but getting them to taste the product really kind of just shifted the mindset to say, this is real, this is an interesting product. We've gone back in subsequent years, and we're now expanding the product line that we're showing, and people are coming back again and saying, oh, I'm following what you're doing. It's amazing. Really hope you guys, succeed, etc. So I think that's the one that I always look back with fondness, because it was hard. We worked hard to get it already, but the response and again, just that sort of giving people a real shift in perception of the product was amazing.
That's huge. Oh, Lupin cheese. That is so cool. And it sounded like they were delighted and surprised by the experience, which made me think, what's one of the wildest products that you guys have developed, even in the prototype, that you can share, of course, using lupins? That was so surprising. Like cheese, obviously, to have that melt, to have that experience is unique and special. But is there anything else that stands out?
So the one that I like is we made a protein enhanced chocolate oat milk. And so in our previous business, we had an oat milk. We made a chocolate version, and we experimented by putting lupin protein into the chocolate oat milk. And it was incredible. It was creamy. It was chocolatey. It was high protein. I think that's my favorite product that we've ever made. And I have a sweet tooth, but yeah, chocolate, high protein, chocolate oat milk. Amazing.
Can't go wrong with chocolate. Oh, that sounds so good. Time for dinner soon. I'm getting hungry. Well, it's your turn, Matthew. What is a question that you'd like to leave with our next guest, not knowing who it is?
So I think my question would be, looking back on your journey, what is the biggest mistake that you made, and what would you have done differently?
Oh, that's a good one. I like that one. Yeah.
It's a good question.
Great question.
That's an excellent question.
Excellent.
We will report back. Oh my goodness. Matthew, thank you so much for your time, your insights, and sharing more with our audience. And we're so excited for this conversation to continue, and for folks to reach out and to connect and to see and experience new options when it comes to protein and product development. So thank you again. So grateful for this time together.
Thank you very much. It's great to talk to you, and I'll get some samples in the mail.
Can't
Fabulous.
wait. Can't wait
Thank
to
you.
test. Thank you, Matthew.